Okay, thank you, Kevin. Um, yeah, as Kev said, my name is Menno Pieters. I'm going to present a documentation tool for IdentityIQ. Uh, just to introduce myself further, I'm a principal solution architect in the EMEA PS team, and I work for SailPoint. So, moving to my slides. So, why do we want this? Well, as Kev said, um, yeah, not everybody likes documenting things, and we as developers, we just like to spend our time on development. It's not our biggest hobby to document things, and it takes a lot of time. But it also needs maintenance. But I know, and I've been in operations for some time. I know it's very important to have documentation because if you have pager duty and you can't find the documentation for the system that just went down or is misbehaving, you have to call your colleague. And if you're that colleague that developed the part, well, you'd better have the documentation ready for the guy that actually does have the pager duty. So it is important to have this documentation. One of the cool things about IdentityIQ is that everything is stored as an XML object and we can extract these objects. So we can extract objects and combine them, or we can also look at our Git repository and just combine the documents or the XML artifacts that we have in the Git repo, combine them into a single XML object, and then we have a tool to convert that XML into documentation, browsable documentation with images, with links, with styling. So what this does is it creates an HTML document using all the XML configuration that we exported or that we collected and combined. And we can already document a lot of IdentityIQ objects. This tool has grown over many years. I started this way before I started working for SailPoint. And during projects, I expanded this. I use this tool during code reviews. I use this tool for project documentation, and it's even been incorporated in a plugin for a customer that wanted some what they called application agreement, a status quo. So what we have in this tool is a table of contents, clickable links between the objects. We have generated embedded SVG images, and the SVG images are used specifically for the workflows. And if you click on the images for the workflows, it will take you to the relevant documentation. The whole system is extensible. We can add new modules to document new object types. And in the next slide, I'm going to show you a list of the object types that we already support. So that ranges from applications to related objects like identities and work groups, the rules that are used in the applications. We can document workflows, tasks, and their schedules. And we document the object config or the extended attributes, but we also use them throughout the other pages like applications, roles, manage attributes. They all make use of those object config attributes. And let's have a look at a couple of screenshots. I'm going to show you some more details later on. This is the menu on the left side, and on the right side, we have the actual documentation. So here we see for the employees application, an example from the training environment, that this is a delimited file application. It uses the delimited file connector, and it's owned by the administrator. And all the extended attributes that I mentioned are also listed below this base configuration set. If we now scroll down on the same page, we also see the rules listed, the aggregation rules, provisioning rules, and some connector-specific rules. And the rules, if configured, are clickable links. So we can click on the name and it immediately takes us to the actual rule code. Here we have an example of a certification. The certification has, well, some properties, the type of certification. We see the name and the owner of the certification and also what's included. So we're going to certify the 389 directory server application and specifically the group objects. When to certify, this is actually a cron expression that is stored in a schedule object. And this is parsed using a so-called cron parser. So it doesn't really look like real English, but at least it is more readable than stars and numbers. And the next execution date is formatted as a date, and the date format itself is configurable. Next slide is the example of the workflows. Here we see a workflow. The icons or the steps are generated as SVG images, and so they're not exactly the same as they look in IdentityIQ, but pretty close. And also the layout is roughly the same. We use the actual locations as configured in the XML objects to locate the objects on the image. So how does this all work? This tool is based on XSLT style sheets. XSLT means extensible style sheet language transformations. And that is a very powerful tool, a powerful framework to convert XML into something else. And that something is typically another XML format or an HTML document or some text. It is, as said, very powerful, but takes also a lot of code. Things that you can do in 5 lines of Perl code would take an entire page of XSLT. But it's really cool if you get to understand XSLT. So the configuration itself is also based on an XSLT style sheet. It's there are several style sheets that are linked together. They include each other. And one of those style sheets is used for the configuration. It generates HTML with embedded JavaScript and style sheets. And we use Java code for some special features. Not all things are easy to program in XSLT, like date conversions and math functions. So we use Java code as an external method to perform those operations. And we use Apache Xalan-J extensions, and I'm thinking of moving to another generator that is more modern and allows us to use new XSLT features. But for now, we're still on Xalan-J. The input for this tool is a single XML document that we have to extract as a whole using, for example, the IdentityIQ console. And it would generate a single HTML page. But it's scrollable, and we have several divs in which we put the different pieces of content. So to extract the information or to get the information as a single document, we can go to the IdentityIQ console and use the export command, specify the object types that we want to export, and specify the file name, and then we get our document. Another option is to use an XML merger. I'll provide a link at the end of this presentation to a tool that merges all the separate objects into a single one. And you can build your IdentityIQ, your custom IdentityIQ, and then from the config folder or the config custom folder in your IdentityIQ build, you can just create a single XML object using that merger. I'm now going to show you how this tool actually works using the command line. And for that, I'm going to first of all show you what I have here. I have my input XML object. That's this one. And under the IIQ doc folder, I have my actual tool installed. And I believe that, yeah, okay. a bit slow on the actual screen. Okay. I hope it catches up now. See on my second screen, monitoring it. Okay. So in the IQ doc folder, I have the lib folder and the XSLT folder, and under the the lib folder is the actual jar that I'm using, and under the XSLT folder, you see all the style sheets. And let me show you the configuration style sheets. IIQ doc, XSLT, IdentityIQ, documenter, config.xsl. I'm just waiting for it to catch up. Yeah, screen share. Okay, there we go. So what we have here is a document, an XSLT document, where we see all kinds of settings, and the settings can have a true or false value, or if we scroll all the way down, you see the settings for the default date format, the long format, and the short format. And that allows us to configure what dates look like in a in the document. If I scroll back up, we can see that there is a document configuration, document audits config, document application settings. So there are several settings that determine what will be included in the document, and I can set them to true or false. And furthermore, for some of the objects like applications, manage attributes, and bundles, I can define what pieces will be included in the document and what detail level will be used. So I'm going to quit this part, and I'm going to run the actual command. And for that, I'm going to use my XML document, and my tool is a Java jar file, Java -jar, and I'm going to specify the tool IQ doc lib derriere. And if I run this, it will give you the output of the Xalan-J tool. This is actually just Xalan-J as the presenter, that is the main class in the jar file. But it tells me that I should provide some inputs, and one is the input file. That would be my XML file here. And I can specify an output file, or otherwise it would write to the standard output, HTML. And then I tell it to generate HTML, and I also need to specify my XSLT transformation document, which is again under the IQ doc folder, IQ doc XSLT, and it's called the IdentityIQ documenter.xsl. One thing to note is that the Java or the sail.dtd file must also be in this folder, otherwise it will give me an error. So I'm going to run the documenter tool, and it should now take a couple of seconds, depending on how large your XML document is and what features you enabled. So it's now generating the HTML. Should take a few more seconds, and then it's done. Okay, and that was it. It's been generated now, and now I can switch to my next screen, and that is where I have the actual site that has been generated. I'm waiting for the screen to catch up. Perhaps if I turn off my camera, might be faster. Okay, so you see my screen now, and at the top is the IdentityIQ configuration. Not everything is documented, but I started with a couple of the most used things, like some settings about default language, cache refresh, some of the options here, email notifications or email settings. Not everything is here. That is because I started with my Git repository, and the Git repository only contains the information that I have changed. So I combined most of my information from the Git repo, and there will be just merge files in case of the IdentityIQ settings. So not everything is here. For specifically for the configuration and for the object config, you may want to export your full configuration or your full set of XML data and combine that with the things that you modified. And that is also true for the audit configuration. If we move to the audit configuration, we'll see only two options. Those are the ones that were included in my Git repo. The object config is just below that, and you can see that it is displaying here. So we have some information on the types of attributes. So for the applications, we have the privileged admin duration as an attribute, an integer. We see that it has the permanent edit mode. We see another attribute also are permanently editable. And if we scroll down, we can see that we have a lot of attributes for identities. And as I said, these are the attributes that are in my Git repo and are not always, this list is not complete unless I export the full object. As you can see, I also have the sources defined here, so I can click on the application directly. I can go to the employees application. If I go back to my identity here, identity attributes again, I can also see that there is an attribute on the 389 DS, and you see also scripts and rules if they are there. For example, here I have a rule, and that immediately takes me to the rule. This is a very simple one. It just returns the value employee for the users that are on the employee database. If I now go to the applications themselves, let's start with the statistics. We can see that there are contractors and employees here listed as the authoritative application. The total number is 8. We can also see the applications for which provisioning is not enabled. And that, let me click on the finance application, is what we can also verify under the features. So here the provisioning feature is missing, which on the 389 is available. Here, once again, we see the name of the application, so the type, the connector, and the owner. Furthermore, we see the attribute schema, everything listed here, and some other information. Provisioning policies. Provisioning policies, if we have a script, it will be listed in the table here. And yeah, all the scripts. And if there's a rule, then it will link to the rule itself. Also, integration configs are listed. We see a very simple listing. Not everything, not all the details are there. We would probably have to extend this later on to to specify the criteria and the attributes for specific types of integration configs. Then work groups. Yeah, as you can see here, we have work groups. Members is a field that would be listed only if you explicitly export all the identities, because the membership is defined on the identities. So in most cases, that would not be doable, especially if you have a large number of users. Task definitions also interesting. Some of the tasks, well, if you see here, there are some warnings. These warning characters are used throughout this document for things that you shouldn't be doing. And this warns you that this is an option that should not be enabled in a production environment. For the aggregation task, we also link to the relevant applications if we can detect them. And tasks that do have one or more schedules will also be listed with their schedules. So we have the check expired mitigations task that is run every day at midnight. And this is once again done using the cron parser. And the coolest thing is about the workflows. And here we have a quick link that starts a workflow. And if I just go to this quick link, we see it runs a workflow. And if I go click on that workflow name, it takes me immediately to the picture of that workflow. And this picture is clickable. So every step is a clickable link. So if I go to provision, it immediately takes me to the provision step. And the provision step itself is implemented by calling the sub workflow provision with retries. And that takes me again to this workflow. And then if I click on the step, I get all the documentation about this step and other steps. Furthermore, we have the email, the rules. Rules are just listed here. And we have email templates also listed as they are. As you can see, the body, if the body is HTML, you will just see the raw HTML. And also forms are printed or listed. And for example, I have an identity update form. And then all the fields will be shown with any scripts, validations, etc. listed in this document. So going back to my presentation. So as you can see, this tool is, well, working nicely, but there's always room for improvement. And that's why I'm inviting you to start using this tool and perhaps suggest new changes or help with the development. Things that could be fixed would be styling, bug fixes. We would have to extend the list of applications that we support. There are lots of connector types, and currently only a handful of connector types are supported for their full configuration. We may also need to document new IdentityIQ features. IdentityIQ itself is evolving. We add new features to the products. So that may also be added to this documentation tool. And one of my big wishes is to move from Xalanje to the Saxon XSLT processor, which is more advanced and under better maintenance. And perhaps if we could split the document into multiple pages with a nice index page and separate pages for each chapter, each object type, it would be scalable. It would be more scalable than it currently is. It works up until a certain size of the XML object. Otherwise, it becomes a bit too big and it would take too long to process. And also for your browser to handle that single XML or HTML page could become a bit challenging. And so far, I have the best results with Firefox. Firefox loads this page pretty fast, while Chrome and Safari are a bit slower in that respect. The code for this tool is available, and I put it on my SailPoint GitHub repo. If you scan this QR code, that will take you to the page, or you can just use that link if you're quick enough. And there's also the XML merger tool. The XML merger tool can be used to just point it to a folder, and it will go through all the subfolders and look for XML objects, SailPoint XML objects, and merge them into a single object that you can feed into the documentation tool. And that concludes my presentation. I'd like to thank you for attending this presentation, and hopefully see you next time.